We're live on YouTube.
We are on YouTube now. Hello and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Those of you watching on YouTube are probably like, what is How doing? I explained this to people if you haven't been following along. I have a USB issue where I have to plug in and unplug certain devices here to get this contraption going, get the pod machine rolling, but we are now rolling on the Hawkeye Hotspot. I am Rod Powell, along with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. We got a lot to talk about today, so we're not going to fart around too much, but we'll probably fart around a little bit. I got up this morning, Scott, and I'm thinking, as I've gotten into covering more high school sports the last few years, I'm like, God, we are lucky in this state to have that Unidome because the kids will be able to play inside the next couple days instead of outside in a really nasty weather.
Yeah, for sure. It was. It's funny because some years it'll be 62 degrees, and you're like, man, what? This sucks. They can't play outside, especially in the semifinals. And then there are years like this where you're going, ugh. I'll never forget when the avalanche started, which was 1991, my senior year. And we had a Halloween snowstorm, and it was like this, except the snow was like 5 or 6 inches. And that was right before the quarterfinal games. And there were only 2 quarterfinal games that played actually outside. The rest were moved either inside at the Unidome or they rented out the Dakota Dome in South Dakota for Western Iowa. And there were 2, and one of which was the game that I was in. That was at Bettendorf High School against Tavian Banks, and it was 7 degrees at kickoff that night.
Did it slow him down?
Not really. And if there's one thing, we lost decisively. We beat them during the season, but we lost decisively in the playoffs. And if there's one thing that I look back and I just go, God, I wish I would have said something, was like most of the Bettendorf players, including him, were wearing like Reebok pumps. Remember those?
Yes.
Yes. And we were wearing cleats, and, we had a really good line. They did too. And our linemen were slipping off the snap. Theirs weren't. And that's all she wrote. And when you have a guy like Tavian Banks, and I always thought, I already knew all this stuff from reading about NFL history. I should have said something because I was the only one who brought other shoes, and it didn't matter because somebody ran an 85-yard kickoff in my lane anyway. So as a long way around to this, and I farted around way too much.
I didn't mean to stir up bad memories.
I know I should just rip down my jersey now, throw it up in the air. Damn, I can't believe this. Gonna go to therapy later, but no.
Well, better luck to the kids up there this weekend, and they get underway in less than a half hour. 9:30 is the 8-man game, and they stream all that stuff on the Iowa High School Athletic Association site through the Iowa High School Sports Network, I think it's called. So I've been watching some of the ones that I've not been able to get to, but I do remember I was reminded last week up there covering West Branch and Van Meter for Your Prep Sports. It was freezing outside, and that short walk from the parking lot to getting into the Unidome is long when it's that cold. And I got inside and I had a hoodie on. I'm like, man, it's warm in here. Took the hoodie off, had his t-shirt on. It's just wonderful weather in there. It's great for the fans to be able to watch. So hopefully everybody has a great couple days up there, and good luck to all the young guys. There's definitely some Hawkeye commitments that'll be in that. Zach Lutmer's in that. Derek Weiskopf's in that. Aiden Hall's in that. Those are the 3 that come to mind right now. Hopefully I'm not missing anybody, but I know at least those 3.
You're missing a pretty good tackle on the 5A game.
We'll get to him later and we'll discuss our thoughts on whether or not he ends up here. But yes, he is also involved, but I was holding him back for later in the show, which I'm sure people will want to hear our opinions on. And that is one Caden Proctor, who has definitely caused a stir this week locally and also in Oregon. So we'll get to that in a bit. Let's start, Scott, by going back, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on Iowa, Wisconsin, a 24-10 Iowa victory. Not that we don't care about it, but we're just a little bit more, we're kind of removed from that and kind of looking towards Iowa, Minnesota, which we'll spend more time on today. But it just, I thought, just in a nutshell for me, it just seemed like Saturday was almost the the prime example of Iowa's complementary football in terms of, we know at this point of the season that Iowa's offense is limited, to be kind, and that the defense and the special teams are elite and getting better. So the offense just needs to contribute a little bit when it has an opportunity given to it by those other two phases. And that's what it did Saturday. And that was enough. And against the Big Ten West this year, we've seen that probably is enough.
Based on what we've seen, it is enough. And you think about just how close they are to being, maybe they're not a very good 8-2 team, but would be 8-2 with just a tad bit more offense. But the other day was perfect complementary football. The defense played as good as it ever has, save for one play. The offense took advantage of plays in the red zone, whether it was, a fumble, they turned into a touchdown to the punt return by Cooper DeJean, who was all over the place, and then a pick six by Cooper DeJean. And they didn't move the ball very much, as we know, 146 total yards. That's the lowest in an Iowa win since 1947. I mean, kind of funny, but they still won 24-10.
Were they wearing leather helmets then, or did they have I think they had moved on from leather helmets at that point, but it was close enough where people remembered it very fondly.
Yeah, right. I don't know if anybody remembers it. Yeah. You have to.
Anybody who played in one.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody who played in that game is now, watching over us as opposed to watching with us. But, yeah, I mean, that's what you're looking at right now with this this team, is that they are incredibly limited offensively. They did some nice things against Purdue and Northwestern, of course, but Wisconsin's got a good defense too, and they created. I knew they would create some problems for Iowa just because they do so many different things, and that's really difficult for Iowa to counter because the way that they pass rush, the way that they drop guys, the way that they attack holes, that even though they don't, outside of about two players, maybe three, that they're really limited on defense, are not the same Wisconsin that we've seen over the years. But still, and they created all kinds of challenges, especially off the edge with Nick Herbig. So I think overall this was just kind of but this is what you want. You beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin's been your litmus test, your barometer that you tested yourself against. And now you beat them at home in front of fans. So you wipe away any kind of qualifiers on when's the last time Iowa beat them with fans in there and all that stuff. So I think overall it was an A+ effort. The defense gets an A-. The special teams gets, an A, and offense gets a C, and that's really all you need.
Yeah, and I think if you compare what we saw Saturday against Wisconsin to what we saw in Champaign, that was the difference. The defense and the special teams gave the offense opportunities in Champaign, and the offense couldn't do anything. The other day, it punched it in and took advantage of those, advantageous field positions. So that's growth to me. Yeah. And I mean, it's got to continue this week, obviously, in another tough game, but we've been sitting here all year saying the offense has to get better. The offense has to grow. I don't think anybody saw Ohio State coming, and that would have been foolish to think you're going to be on that level, but you just have to keep getting better. And that's kind of the mantra of this program, is continuing to get better, be the best you can be as a unit. And it's getting there, but we'll see this week. This is another big test. We'll talk more about that, but, yeah, I had somebody ask me on the mailbag if I felt like this is the best defense of the Ferentz era, and I'm getting there. I mean, statistically, it's getting there, and I'm just getting. I don't like to make those proclamations before the season's over, but I'm certainly very much considering it now.
Yeah, because there's been different iterations that we know of course, that were very, very good. 04 kind of stands out, and that year was similar to this one in some ways. They just made more plays on offense. They had a quarterback who could make a little bit more plays, and they at least had one aspect of the offense they could lean on a little bit more and make it happen. But the defense was elite, as we know. From 08 to 2010 was really good. As we know, and especially in 09, because the linebackers were at a high level. And I would say 2 years ago in the COVID year, that was also at a very, very high level. But this one to me is the most complete of the three of the group. And when I look at it is you look at all three levels, and the defensive line, unlike what we saw in 2009 or even 2 years ago, it is so deep now. They can go 8-9 deep, and you have the front line that's more technically sound and proficient and tough and understands it. And then you have the kind of the second line, which is really filled with incredible talent, and that's come through. And then you have
having lost an incredible talent for the season. This also speaks to depth.
Yeah, with
are you talking to backup defensive linemen, or are you talking linebackers?
I'm talking defensive line.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
I thought when you said the second unit, I thought you were talking line.
Oh, second level. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No, second defensive line, because when you look at Noah Shannon and John Wagner and Joe Evans, are any of them NFL players? Yeah, they're going to get their chance. I don't know if they're going to get drafted, but when you look at Lucas Van Ness and Y.A. Black and Aaron Graves and Deontay Craig, and you're going, okay, yeah, this is a unit that's comparable to the Claiborne, Ballard, Benz, Daniels, Klug type unit. But when you have two of them instead of one, you don't have what you had in 2010, which was they had the lead or were tied in all five of their losses with 5 minutes to go, and they gave it up. And they gave it up on defense, rather than offense. It wasn't an offense issue. Yeah, right. Dan Persa, Terrell Pryor, Nick Foles, the Minnesota game you just throw out. And then, of course, fake punt against Wisconsin. And all those games were because the defense gave it up late. They had the lead or they were tied. This one, you don't have to worry about. And the secondary is the equal of just about any of those units. And Jack Campbell may be the best linebacker that I was, had since Larry Station, and you can make that argument. I think Josie Jewell was fantastic, but I think Pat Anger was great. I think Jack Campbell's the best.
Yeah, I agree. I thought Josie kind of raised the bar above where Pat was. And Pat was really good too. It's not taking anything away from you. And when we talk about the Kirk Ferentz era, we've kind of seen the evolution of that position as well, because Abdul Hodge, Fred Barr, those guys were really good. Different day, different type of defense, different, linebacker makeup, frame, what's asked of them. And it's kind of, Campbell's a friggin' Borg, man. 6'4", 6'5", 250, whatever he is, give or take. That's the evolution of what we've seen in college football players and linebackers. And he's amazing. I asked Logan Lee the other day, because I was interested to hear kind of how those guys feel about coming off the field, and if it's, how they accept, being a starter, but not always being out there, or not being out there, a ton. Because the rotations are pretty fluid. The backups play quite a bit. And he's like, listen, man, I would love to be out there every play. I love to play football. I want to be out there every play, but I realize the benefits when I'm on the sideline and I get rest and those guys are doing their jobs. I go back in, I've got an advantage. I'm recharged. And that's something I don't think maybe people think about or consider as much, but that defensive line depth is really where it starts, I think, for the defense, because you look the last three weeks, and I know you probably know this, Stout, how many sacks they have, but they've just been, they're making things easier on those, the second, third levels, because they're putting pressure on quarterbacks.
No question. And when you look at, Logan Lee and Joe Evans, two starters were in there late in the game. They still had burst, they still had toughness, and that's where they got the finale. When you had Joe Evans coming off the edge and knocking the ball away from Graham Mertz, and then Logan Lee being able to recover it. Maybe if they played 15 to 20 more snaps at that point, they don't have the burst. Maybe they don't get there. Maybe there's, and I'm not saying, and we could talk out of both sides of our mouth, and I can too, but they were able to do it. And I do think that the lower snap count is really a factor when you can throw in, Aaron Graves and Ethan Herkett and Max Llewellyn and Deontay Craig, who's come on really strong, and Lucas Van Ness, who probably has the highest upside out of anybody, and Y.A. Black, once he gets healthy, he is healthy sort of, but once they all kind of get into that, they all play so well. And that's why I think that if they do get to Indianapolis, I'm nowhere near predicting any kind of win. But I do think that the defense, if they play like, say, Michigan, will play better than they did the first time around. I think that they're capable. And that game was the first time they played somebody who could really run the ball on them. And they haven't played anybody since who could do that. I mean, this week they're capable of running it on them if they don't play well, but I think they got the potential. And then, the secondary, Cooper DeJean's a different type of player. I was talking on Monday night with Marvin McNutt on Iowa Live, and one thing we brought up was just how, everybody wants to compare him to Tyler Sash, and I think there's some reasons for that. Not only small town kid, he's built the same way,
basketball exploits,
and plus the way they look.
Yeah, I think he's kind of like a hybrid of Hyde and Sash.
And that's what I was going to say is he plays like Micah Hyde. And when you're built like Tyler Sash and you play, have the speed, the athletic ability, the ball skills, you know what you have? You have an NFL Pro Bowl safety. Because Micah Hyde's gone to the Pro Bowl several times. He won't this year, unfortunately, he's hurt. But then you have a bigger version of that, and you have a Eric Weddle type or something. I mean, and he's playing corner, which is pretty rare. And I think right now, and then, Riley Moss got burned the other day, but then he made up for it. He got an interception, and Kayvon Merriweather's playing at a really high level. And I think, Quinn Schulte's been very solid, and Sebastian Castro came in a tough spot with, you think about it, probably, with both Terry Roberts being hurt most of the year, with Jamari Harris being out all year. They've had to throw some guys in there, and Sebastian Castro's had a really nice season, I thought, at that cash position, and he's going to make things difficult next year when there are guys coming in. So I think they've played really well at all three levels, and to lead the country in yards per play allowed and to give up play 100 plays more than just about any other team in that category says a lot about this defense.
Yeah, no question. And you hit on it there too. You consider, it's a defense that lost its starting quarterback in Jamari Harris, starting linebacker in Justin Jacobs, and then Terry Roberts, kind of a do-it-all special teams guy and defensive guy, and still to play at that level. That speaks a lot to the depth on that side of the ball throughout the program. Yeah,
right. And, and they'll have to do some of that next year. I don't know what the losses will be. I know talking to a few of the players and, about whether they return or not. I know Joe Evans just kind of brought it up and said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Noah Shannon said, I've thought a little bit about it, but not totally. If I was Terry Roberts, I'd consider whether it's here or, anywhere. I think it makes sense for him to come back. I think it makes sense for Kayvon Merriweather to go to the league. And I would say
Seth the same. Benson's an interesting one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's kind of like most safeties. I always say go to the league. Geno Stone was the one where I was like, well, maybe, but he's still in the league and he's starting, so good for him. But Seth, another year of wear and tear on your body. Does it help you, hurt you? I think he could be on an NFL roster. I don't know if he'd be a draft pick or a free agent. I mean, Campbell, no question, go. But I think he is an interesting one. And then you look at, him, Jacobs, and Higgins. Yeah, they're none of the three are Campbell, although Jacobs is in that talent pool. He swims in that talent pool. But then you've got a pretty good trio again. And then with that line, in the back part, Rob, I mean, I don't know if I think Cooper DeJean's most natural position is probably safety, but I don't think you budge him from corner at this point. Not at Iowa, maybe at the next level. And then, then you have Jamari Harris, maybe Roberts comes back. And then in the back part, I think Quinn Schulte and Xavier Wampa are your two guys, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yep. It's going to look good next year too, despite the losses, just like what happened this year. So,
yeah.
Let's move on to the pig. Flip that in because we got a lot to talk about today. Both teams 4-3 in division. This is basically an elimination game. And for those that don't know the scenarios, if Iowa wins out and Illinois loses one, and Illinois plays at Michigan this week, the Hawkeyes would return to Indianapolis to play. You would assume the winner of Michigan and Ohio State. Yeah, you would, because then Michigan would be remain unbeaten going into the Ohio State game. So yes, it would be one of those two. So this is Minnesota has run the ball, I think, 461 times this year and thrown it 221 times. So there's really no mystery here going into what they want to do offensively. It's just a matter, as we talked about earlier, I think we talked about the offense kind of making progress as this season's gone on. For the defense, this is kind of a great challenge after having, Blake Corum, Chase Brown, those, and Mo Ibrahim is like those guys. He's like that bowling ball that comes through there. You better not try to arm tackle him. You got to rally to the ball. You got to make sure he's down, because he keeps those legs going. This is the challenge for this defense. Pride. We didn't play as well as we wanted to against those other two running backs. Here comes another guy who's equally as good. Can we stop him? We know it's coming.
He's different too, because he's bulkier than those other two, but he's not like a big bowling ball type like we saw with Braylon Allen. He's legitimately, I compare him to Marshawn Lynch. He's beast mode in the way he runs, because he's big, he's physical, but he's quick. He's got good speed. He can hit the hole. He's got 18 straight games with 100 yards, which is a record at some level.
He's missed some games because of injury, but still the 18 games he's played in, he's got 100. And there were a few games I looked at their notes this year where he barely played into the second half, and he already had, the non-conference games.
Yeah, exactly. And you look at all the things that he's been able to do, and he has 18 touchdowns. He missed a game earlier this year. So, I mean, he's different. They would love to have any of those three backs, obviously, but he and probably Corum, but I would say definitely Ibrahim is definitely one that they would love to have in Iowa, because he just fits so many different things. And what they do so well is it's like they have a different kind of zone run where they'll kind of collapse one side of the ball, and he'll take kind of the zone read, and then he'll just scoot off the backside, and it's always seems to be open. And he very rarely goes even or backwards. It's always forwards, and it's always twisting. And then, so, you can tackle him 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden he twists, and it's 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5. And you're like, man, I thought we had that guy. And, and he does that so often.
And they're number one in third down conversions in the country, I think. Aren't they offensively? And then stopping it defensively. And he's the reason offensively, because like you said, Scott, they get 2nd and 5. 3rd and 3.
They're always ahead. They're always ahead of the chains. And that's the crazy, that's because of him, and their line is big and it's physical, and they have a great center in Schmitz. He's an All-American, and
John Jacob
Jingleheimer Schmitz. His name's not my name too, but oh my God, you can tell we have kids, right?
Yeah, he's up for the Outland. I think I saw that come out yesterday. He made. Are they up to the finalists now or semifinalists?
These are the 7 guys, and he means he's a first team All-American is what it means. He and Olu from Michigan are both as good as it gets. But
yep.
But yeah, I mean, but they have other linemen. They're not quite as good as they were last year, but they're still very effective in what they do, which is something Iowa needs to kind of learn how to do, because even when you lose a bunch of linemen like they did, they're still able to run the ball. And that's probably the distressing part for Iowa's offense, is it hasn't been able to do that for 2 years now. And but Rushmeyer's really good. They're guards. They're not as good on the edge, and I think that's where Iowa in the pass situation is going to be more effective. But Ibrahim's a guy that you really have to be. You have to be in tune with. And I'm curious to see what Iowa decides to do as far as packaging goes. They've still been very cash heavy, and Castro hits like a linebacker. So you're not losing a whole lot. You're losing some mass if you got to take on blockers. But, as far as tackling and hitting, you're not losing much. But I do think that this is something that they've got to be, do they go 4-3 most of the time? Do they really load up? Because without Chris Ottman-Bell at receiver, they have a good tight end, and their passing game's comparable to Iowa's, where it's other than tight end.
They do it differently. They approach it differently. The philosophy is different. These offenses have the same limitations, I think.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, now, what Minnesota does that Iowa doesn't do is, run for 100 yards every game and throw complete passes at a good percentage. They're just not dangerous. We've seen it before with Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman and Ottman Bell, that on the outside they're very. But one of the things that they do now, they are almost exclusively passing into the in between the hashes, which is tight end territory. Yep. And Brevin's, and Brevin, Ford, Span Ford is really good. He's considered, at least by PFF, to have a better grade than Laporta. I would disagree that he's better than Laporta, but I think
they're pretty similar.
Yeah, I think they're probably two of the two best maybe in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Span Ford is bigger and has more size to him, but I think Laporta is probably a little more agile. Either way, they're both really good players, and that's the one you got to watch out for. And I think what they're going to try to do, and especially in the cold, because I don't see them, they're not a distance throwing team, is that they're going to try to run, zone read, fake, throw to the tight end across the middle. And if you can disrupt that, and then you got a really good chance of forcing them to punt more than they want to.
Yeah, it's that RPO element that's different than because I think there are quite a few similarities to Wisconsin in that you're dealing with big offensive linemen, but the difference is kind of some of those zone reads that Scott's talking about in the RPO, and just you have to be disciplined. You have to keep your eyes, make sure your eyes are where they need to be, and not get yourself out of position, because that's when you start giving up plays you don't want to give up. And I have confidence that Minnesota is going to certainly have limited opportunities against Iowa's defense, and we'll see. We'll see if it can convert on those. And then similarly, the other way around, I think Iowa's going to have limited opportunities on offense outside of if there's a turnover or special teams play, and Iowa's going to have to play that field position game.
Yeah, that's where Iowa's going to have to be strongest, because Minnesota has done a really nice job defensively this year, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a great defense. I think they've been fortunate to play. They haven't had to play Ohio State or Michigan. They played Colorado in the non-conference. They still have to play Wisconsin and Iowa, but they've been effective for the most part. But they got drubbed by Illinois way worse than Iowa did, obviously. And so I think, what they do is they've got a lot of guys up front, kind of like Iowa, but not as effective and not as deep. They have an outstanding secondary. And then they've got good players at the second level at linebacker. Like, Sorry Morin seems like he's been there forever, but he's a good middle linebacker. He's not a guy that's going to win. He's not Campbell. He's not anybody like that. And Braylon Oliver's been there forever. I think they have more 6-year players than just about everybody. And Lindenberg's really good too. But he's probably the best of the bunch. But their secondary is something that they have to be cognizant of, because Tyler Nubin at safety is one of the better ones in the conference. And I think Justin Wally doesn't have the statistics, but he's got a lot of upside. And, Smith has been there forever. I think he played in the 18 game against Iowa. So they've got some, depth there. But it's going to be about, like, success for Iowa isn't always going to be about scoring points. It's about putting yourself in position to continue to win the field position game. And if that means you get the kickoff to open the game and touchback, you got the ball at 25, get 2 first downs, get it to midfield, have Corey Taylor punt, and then they get the ball at the 8 or 9 or the 11, something like that. And if you can hold them to a first down, to no first downs or 1, then you get the ball midfield, and then you kind of play this back and forth game to where then you force them to make a mistake and you don't. And then that's where you take advantage of it. That's where the complementary comes in, when the offense can't really create its own shot, if you will.
Yeah. And the last I looked, I'm trying to bring it up now, but last I saw, I think the over under is 32 and a half, which is kind of obscene when you think about it. That, let me see here if I can find Iowa. Anyway, it's low, and the reason is points are going to be at a premium, and what we're talking about in terms of field position is big. And I know it frustrated fans last week, and I asked Spencer about this the other day, and we got into a nerdy football conversation. I think you came in on that, just about, fans booing because Iowa's not going to throw, a 30-yard pass on 3rd and 20 when your quarterback is under siege all game because the offensive line isn't blocking Nick Herbig. You have to be smart too. And I get it. Fans want to go for it, but you need to play smart football, especially against teams like Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois, those teams where it's a rock fight. You've got to have more rocks.
Yeah. You play, your old coach, you play to win the game. And winning the game isn't throwing the ball up for grabs because it's 3rd and long. It's playing the long game, which is, like at Purdue, the wind was even worse than it was the other day. It wasn't as cold, but, but they were up. And I know people there are people going, I can't believe we have such a bad quarterback. He was only like 3 of 8 or something in the second half. And why didn't they do this? I'm like, because they're up 3 touchdowns on the road against a team that's capable of scoring points in bunches. But if you don't give them any way to score, then they're not going to score. And it's the same way as last week. When your defense is playing that well, don't put them in a bad position. Don't let Nick Herbig get his 4th sack off the edge, force a fumble, or lose another 10 yards in field position on the next drive, because you're going to punt anyway. They're not high percentage passes. This isn't 3rd and 3. That's different. And
in these 2 weeks, you had Torchio last week, who's just waiting for you to make a mistake, and now you've got Nubin this week. So you make a mistake, those guys are playmakers back there, like Cooper DeJean.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, just imagine you're playing against Iowa's defense. What would you do? I mean, think of it that way. I get the frustration, please. I certainly do. But I
think some of it's a cumulative effect from the season too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they would have beaten South Dakota State 27-3 instead of 7-3, or lost 29-26 to Illinois instead of 9-6. I mean, maybe they would have had different thoughts, but still, the season is what. But when you look at the last 3 weeks, what they've outscored 3 Big Ten West opponents, 81-26. You're there to win and win decisively. They have. All 3 of those wins have come by at least 2 touchdowns, including Wisconsin, the team that has kind of owned you for recent years. Are they as good as they once were? No, but neither is Iowa. I mean, Iowa's defensively they are, but their offense isn't nearly as even in the same stratosphere as what it was 4 years ago with Hawkinson and Fant and Brandon Smith and Amir Smith-Marset and Nate Stanley, and maybe at running back they're comparable, but those are the things you have to keep your eyes on the big picture. win the game. How do you get to win the game? Last year, remember Penn State, where at the end of it, they get an interception and you get in your 4-minute offense to just try to close it out. And Kirk went to the most incredible conservative thought, which was take knees. Now, I don't know if he misread the clock or what, but you took knees and then punted and then left your defense on the field. Nobody in the world does that except Iowa, because that's how you win the game. You're more afraid of fumbling than you are of just running out the clock or forcing them to take time out. So I think in this case, it's the same thing. If they're up 13-3 in the third quarter and it's 3rd and 7 and they run a draw for 2 yards, at home, you're going, what are you doing? Well, you're just trying to, you're just trying to play defense. You know how to win this game. That's what it really comes down to. Now, if you play in Indianapolis, that's not the way to win that game. But this is the way you win the game here.
Yeah, it's the same. I mean, 2 weeks ago, people got a little bit bent out of shape the way Iowa approached the offensive side of the ball in the second half against Purdue. But that was the smart thing to do. Purdue was not going to score on Iowa's defense. It was obvious. You play smart. Yeah. It's kind of like you have to watch the sausage being made, and sometimes it's not pretty, but it tastes good at the end. And that's what you want.
Yeah. I mean, and Iowa sausage is more like generic hot dogs at this point. Yeah. But you got to live with it, because what do? You play to win the game. You don't want to get, because the worst
teams don't know what their identity is. That's the strength of Iowa's program.
Yeah, it is the most self-aware program in the country. It knows what it wants to do, and it does it. Now, it doesn't offensively, it doesn't do it very well right now. Maybe next year it will, maybe in the future it will, but at this point it doesn't. But, the stupidest thing that they could have done at Purdue in that weather is for Spencer on 3rd and 7 in the second half when you're up 24-3, after the long touchdown run, is hang a pass up there, it gets picked off. Yeah. And then maybe they return it, maybe they just get momentum. And then voila. Okay, then they hit a big pass to Charlie Jones, and they're excited and they're pumped up, and then you go 3 and out again, and then they're on the field, and you've already got them in a death grip. Keep them there. Don't you won 24-3. There's no use in making this a scary contest that comes down to the end when it doesn't need to be. So I just, because Kirk owes that to his defense too. He owes that to his special teams, and to play again, to win the game. Now, you got to take chances when they're there, but you got to look at the situation. And I think in this case, playing conservative, risk averse on offense in order to put yourself in a position to win the game is the best possible thing you can do.
I haven't seen any updates on this, Scott, and I'm guessing we're not going to get one because there's really no advantage to PJ Fleck talking about his quarterback situation. So could be Tanner Morgan, could be Ethan K. I don't know how to say Ethan's last name, although I've talked to him and interviewed him because Iowa offered him and he visited here. How do you say his last name?
I've been trying to figure that out myself. Calamanis, I think it is. Calamanis.
Califragilisticexpialidocious.
It's the funny part is as you started to bring him up, I'm like, oh crap! So I went straight to their say, okay, here it is, pronunciation guide. That's Ethan.
I know it's Ethan.
Calamanis. Calamanis.
Redshirt freshman, and he's played the last game and a half. Morgan went out, I think, halfway through the Nebraska game. So,
and he's played before too. He had to play like in Illinois. He had to play, and he's even, Tanner Morgan uses more of the field. He is really set in between the hash marks. He'll throw mainly in the 10 to 20 yard range between the hash marks, between the tackle box. It's kind of funny when you look at it just outside the numbers. Outside, he's thrown 18 passes and 5 completions outside the tackle box. Inside, he's thrown he's 20 of 34. And that's what makes sense. It's play action, RPO, boom, Smith, span forward. And so now one thing he does a little bit better than Morgan does now, because Morgan's as old as we are, is he does run the ball better. So there is some element to him, and I would say it's probably more like Graham Mertz.
Yeah,
he's and not like Lamar Jackson or anything like that. But so he just kind of moves well. But he's 27 of 58, so he's not a great percentage passer anyway, with 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. So if it is Callie Manis,
Ethan,
Ethan is his first name, so don't mess me up.
Just call him Ethan.
Yeah, Ethan.
Ethan K.
Ethan K. I think this, if they cover the tight end and it's him, you feel pretty good about stopping him, because in a cold day with some wind, that's one thing Spencer can do that other quarterbacks can't. I'm not saying he can be accurate, but he can cut the ball through the wind. He's got big hands. So Ethan may struggle with that, especially against Iowa's secondary. And that's why I think you might see more 4-3, not only to load up against Ibrahim, but to load up the box and gets in those passing situations.
Yeah, that seems like the best approach here, at least initially. If it's not working, you can always swap out and bring Castro in if Minnesota is planning for that 4-3 and has a plan against that. It's interesting though, because there's those little tweaks. These teams know each other so well, but each can tweak it a little bit to at least create a little bit of deception for the opponent, and then maybe hit one. That's kind of the idea of that. Try to get something early that you can hit.
Yeah. Well, it's what's interesting about Minnesota to me is that PJ Fleck is disliked by most fan bases that aren't Minnesota.
He wears tight pants. He likes tight pants.
Yeah. He wears capris and defense and stuff.
Not everybody can pull that off.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not sure if he's pulling it off.
Yeah. High waters to most guys, but capris to himself. But hey, God bless him. He does a good job. But you cannot underestimate the cultural impact that he's had on the program, because they know what they are. They win. Do they win titles? Not yet. But he does care about his players too. And they come back. They come back for 6 years. They do a lot of things there that I think reflects on him. And they've done a really nice job. I mean, defensively, they're outstanding. And they weren't a couple years ago. Their defense was like Iowa's offense this year. It was just really bad. And he's built it. He's made changes when he's needed to. He's, they are, a program that you have to be cognizant of now. And that's a credit to him. So when I look at will Tanner Morgan start or not, I think it's going to be about health with him. I don't think that PJ's we gotta play him. He's got to play. Even if he wants to, because I just think that he's not going to put his guy at risk, even for a victory against his a rival that he hasn't beaten and a trophy he hasn't won yet.
Yeah, you just look at what Fleck has been able to do in Minneapolis and compare that to what happened with Frost in Lincoln. So exactly. I mean, both had a chance to kind of form their program and build an identity, and one succeeded and one did not.
Mm-hmm. No question. And, in Fleck, I mean, Nebraska has the infrastructure, to be very successful. Its infrastructure is like Iowa, but you got to give it 1.2 if Iowa's a 1. I mean, it does have more money. It has more tradition and history. It has, just a few more pluses, and it gets good talent. But, Frost never never made it work. But then you look at Fleck and Minnesota, the Gophers are almost every year 5th most interesting sports team in Minneapolis. The Vikings are number 1, and they'll never budge. Yet he has them competitive every year. They're competing. They're going to bowl games. They're winning. Like last year they won a lot. The year was 2019 they won 11 games. So they've done a good job there. They've been competitive against Ohio State, and Michigan, and stuff. So I think that you've got to give him credit, and he's turned it into that. Now can he take it to the next step? I don't know, but I do think he's done it. And Nebraska, I'm sure the fans, they won't want to admit it, but they'll look at it and go, yeah, he's done a pretty good job there.
Yep, no question. And it should be an entertaining game on Saturday. Don't expect a lot of points. I want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That's sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for its support of the podcast. We're going to hear from a few more of our sponsors now, and Scott and I will be back on the other side to talk a little high school offensive tackle, Central Iowa topic that everybody's been waiting for. And I'm going to get a little more coffee for that. And we're back. Thank you to our sponsors, one and all. We appreciate them very much. And thank you guys for listening. This surprised me, Scott, I think because he played Friday night, in a state semifinal. And then we get up the next day and we're kind of preparing for the Iowa-Wisconsin game. And then boom, hey, Caden Proctor is out in Eugene, Oregon, visiting the Ducks for its game, for their game against Washington. Big game. Oregon blew that. Give credit to Washington. But nobody wants to hear about that. This is an interesting case study for a lot of reasons. There's different layers to this. And if you don't think NIL is a layer to this, you're just not paying attention. I have not talked to Caden. I've reached out to him, as I'm sure everybody has. He has not really spoken about this. I think he spoke to somebody from 247 yesterday, the Iowa State writer. I'm guessing who went out to practice or got him in person, because that's kind of where he's at now. And I respect that. I mean, he's getting bombarded. So, if you want to come out and talk to me, you come out and talk to me in person. I'm not talking to you via text or DM or on the phone. So, and he has a game tomorrow night. He's playing for a second straight state championship, Southeast Polk against West Des Moines, the upstart surprise West Des Moines Valley. But this is a recruiting process, and I've talked about it on here before, and people kind of get tired of hearing it, but it's a process. You go through a process to the point of where you're done. And verbal commitments are not done. For some people, they are, but, they're also a way of securing your spot. Not that somebody like Caden Proctor needs to secure his spot. He could go wherever he wants, but they're also teenagers who may think they know what they want to do, but aren't sure, and then maybe have some doubt. And then you've got a bunch of adults, feeding that, saying, are you really sure that you want to do this? I mean, from what I've been able to gather here, Oregon hasn't stopped since he's committed to Iowa, which was back in June. Was the verbal back in June?
July? Yeah. His verbal was the same day USC and UCLA.
Okay, that's right.
In fact, it was about the same moment.
But I mean, I guess I would advise people not to get too wound up over this, because it's just life now in college football. And I don't think you should, trash the kid or, make this more dramatic than it needs to be. Let the kid go through this and figure out what he wants to do and decide. And he's a high school kid trying to decide his future.
Yeah, this is the reality of the situation these days. And you're talking about an upper echelon kid that Iowa just generally doesn't get. And the only reason why they really got him to begin with was he's, from the state, huge fan, been here a million times. Tristan Wirfs is his guy, all those types of things. Well, now you're trying to argue or discuss the differences between your heart and your pocketbook. And that's something that everybody will go through at some point in their life, which is you like something, maybe somewhere where you work, but somebody else is offering you a lot more money, and how much is it worth it to do that? And so now, it's not that different than maybe what we've dealt with before, where you're, okay, I'm going to throw it back to my current employer. What are you going to give me if I stay? And it doesn't have to be the same, but I'm going to have to get a little more because they're valuing me here. And so I think that's probably where they are right now. And this is a very uncomfortable spot for Kirk Ferentz because it's something he's never dealt with well. We remember the Texodus. It's a different situation, but not that different. I mean, where you just had Benjamin. I never thought he was going to leave Iowa for anybody else. I just thought it was more like, hey, I'm getting bored. I want to go and, this is exciting and stuff. And but they had no problem shooing him out the door, and along with about 4 other players went with him. This case is you have a highly sought after NFL left tackle trying to decide between 2 places. And I know when Iowa fans are like, well, why wouldn't he want to be here? Look at this worst. Well, look at Penei Sewell. And you look at the Nike money and you look at all that, I think that's something that, and I know Iowa's reflecting on it because there's all kinds of different tentacles here, which is if you up your NIL, what does that say to your current players? What kind of jealousies are there? Those are stuff that Kirk Ferentz, of course, has always wanted to avoid, but he's too good to just say, you know what, go, we don't care. He's local. He's been with you for a while. So this is a tough situation, and this is the new world we live in. And what Kirk Ferentz decides to do, it will have ramifications one way or the other. He's just going to have to know which way he wants to live with.
Yeah, that's the most interesting layer, as you said, tentacle to this story is this will, for lack of a better term, make Kirk Ferentz compromise his principles, his beliefs, which are you come to college and you earn it and then you get rewarded by that. That's not the landscape anymore. It's just not. And you can say that and take, I don't know, what you feel is the moral approach, ethical approach of, we're treating everybody equally until they come here and show it on the field. The competitors aren't doing that. And you can say to Caden Proctor, listen, man, you go to Iowa, look at all the guys in the NFL we've produced, we've developed. You have a great chance. He's a plug and play offensive tackle coming to high school. There just aren't a lot of those guys in the country. It's a rare unicorn, and he is that guy. And you just say to him, come on here, we'll develop you, get ready for the NFL. One is you're assuming that Oregon can't do that. And Scott brought up Penei Sewell. So obviously Oregon can do that. Oregon is also one of the finalists for the Joe Moore Award this year. They lose 4 guys off of that line, so he can go in there and play next year. And he's going to get a chunk of money up front that is a safety net, a parachute in case something happens to him when he's in college. He has the money up front. He knows he's got that money. And I think ultimately, Scott, you touched on it early, value. How does Oregon value me monetarily, and how does Iowa value me monetarily? Why is Oregon going to offer me 7 figures and you're giving me $2,500 a month and giving me an opportunity to do a car commercial or, a restaurant commercial? It is apples to oranges. And this, to me, overall, beyond Caden Proctor, is the case study of how Iowa's going to do with this NIL.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And it's damn scary because it's not, you think back to 2004, Rob, and when Bob Bowlesby said, the worst part about not being worst part of the arms race is not being in the arms race. And that was his justification for keeping Kirk Ferentz and not having him, and paying him $4 million a year, which was just seemed astronomical at the time. And so he didn't go to Cleveland or Jacksonville or any of the other NFL spots. He quit looking. You're kind of in the same boat now 20 years later. which is either you're in it or you're not. And I'm not suggesting that Iowa should pay like Oregon or Texas A&M or Miami, as we saw with now Texas A&M. All those players are young, so we'll see what they turn into. But this has been a disaster for them, and Miami hasn't been very good either. I don't know that they get to a bowl game. However, as you said, you have wow. But by the way, the Iowa State series extended until 2027. That just came over. So sorry, guys, that ruins your day, I'm sure. But anyway, they. But what I'm thinking about with this is, you got to get into this race. You got to figure out a way, whether that's through your fan or your donors. And I think Iowa, it was slow to get in the collective game, and it took one heck of a guy to put himself into it. And he's working his ass off. And they got to find a way to persuade donors and others. You're going to have to push, because it's the difference between being a good program and a great program. It's the difference between being an Outback Bowl team that sometimes wins 10 games and being one that goes to Indy and has a real shot at winning it and going to the playoff and doing some damage when it's a 12-team playoff.
Yes, and I think it's that gap, Scott, that needs to be closed. I mean, again, you're not Phil Knight money. You're not as crazed as the people at College Station, in terms. Iowa has a limited amount of resources in terms of its program. And we've talked about this on this podcast. I know we have. You have to redirect some money here to player acquisition and player retention, because other schools are doing that. You can't just have a socialistic system where everybody gets the same amount. It's just not real life right now in college sports. It's not what the landscape is. You don't have to be Oregon or Texas A&M or Miami, but you need to close that gap a little bit. You have to have the ability, when you need to put resources towards player acquisition and retention. And Iowa's like, they're at the bottom of this. They're like at the bottom of the NIL food chain right now. They've got to come up. They just have to. Whether it's what Nebraska's doing or what other programs, Michigan, whatever, something, you have to do more than just what they're doing right now. To me, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, and Kirk's way will be the best way, and that's the socialistic. Everybody gets a certain amount of money every month, and that works. I just really doubt that that's going to work. Uh-oh.
You're right. It's not. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's not going to work long term, Rob. It's not going to work in the big picture, because again, you could. And I've thought this, and once everything's changed, that out of the 22, 24 guys that they sign every year, 90% of them, 85% of them, they'll be happy with the socialistic system of, here, you just sign up for this and you go and volunteer here and you get $5,000 a year and you're happy with it. And then
everybody gets the same amount of toilet paper.
Right, exactly. Or, your hometown, like Cooper DeJean, gives you a new car and stuff like that. And that's fine. But then you've got the ones you're competing with, not only, upper echelon like Caden Proctor with Oregon and Alabama and other teams at Ohio State, but the ones that are competing at Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa State, Minnesota. Those are the ones you really got to be more concerned with, that 4-star, from Chicagoland area, or the 3-star that you really, really like. You're like, how does this kid only a 3-star? Those are the ones that you're going to have to pony up for, because if you lose them, what's going to happen, which is when they do develop, and they're going to develop if they're at Minnesota or Illinois or whatever, Iowa State, they're the ones that could beat you on third down in some random game 2-3 years down the road. So you've got to make sure you're the one doing it. And as successful as Iowa's been over time in donations and support from its fan base, it has to turn on the hose to the donors and say, look, we love you. but we would love it even more if you directed some of your revenue this way, because they've got enough Big Ten money coming in that, player acquisition is going to be the key to sustaining Iowa's excellence. Otherwise, if they go, like this year, it looked like after the Ohio State game that they weren't going to go to a bowl game. And if their talent pool dries up, Kirk Ferentz retires, they get a bad coach, shoot, they could be, it wouldn't take too long before they go from 70,000 a game to 58,000 a game. And then you're really screwed financially.
And I think it's also going to be useful in player retention. Mm-hmm. There's no saying. I mean, we saw it with Charlie Jones. That wasn't NIL, but, you have a guy that sees greener pastures and gets what he feels is valued because he's getting something somewhere else that another place values him more. And it comes into this, the thought process of, do you as a student athlete, as a player, are you dedicated? Are you committed to our program? Well, that's fine when it's just everybody's doing this. Nobody's giving anybody any money, any resources. But now that money's involved, it's a factor. It has to be a factor. And I know people are probably listening saying, well, if they really want to be Hawkeyes, if they're really true Hawkeyes, they'll come here. I would say, I don't know what percentage you want to put on it, but the vast majority of people feel better about themselves when they feel valued. And money is part of that. It's not just, hey, we love you, we want you in the black and gold. Part of it is, what am I worth to you? How important am I to you? And money is a factor now. It wasn't before NIL. It is now. Well, it was before at certain places, but now that it's out in the open, you have to show that you value guys. And if a guy comes in, and I'm not saying anything about Caleb Johnson, but he will be my example here, because I like Caleb a ton. I got to know him in recruiting. Say somebody comes and offers him 7 figures after this season. They say, hey, look at that running back from Iowa. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do to retain him? Right. You may not have to give him 7 figures, but you may have to show him that you value him more than that stipend every month.
Right. I mean, now you can legitimately give somebody $75,000 in a new blazer. Unlike 30 years ago between Iowa and Illinois for a really good Chicago.
It makes the movie Blue Chips.
Yeah.
And, Deion Thomas.
Yes, I know. I was wondering when you're going to catch that, but, Blazer. But no, and you think about your own life when you it's easy to say, well, I just want my college football players to love the Hawks as much as I do. Well, yeah, that's easy and simple. I mean, but it's like saying, I hope my kids love me, and then you give them an allowance or you don't. But I think but when you're working for a job, and let's face it, college football is now a job. When you're making $100 million off your rights fees and stuff, it's a job. When your coach makes $9 million, it's a job. And for the players, you think about your own life and your own career. And yes, you may love where you work and who you work for, and you would do anything for them, but you want to be appreciated. And what's the best way to be appreciated? Rewarded financially, to get that raise, to get that bump, hey, here's a bonus. You did a really good job. It's not just, that's what it involves today. Like it or not, it doesn't matter. It's not going away. So you got to get in the game or you're not in the game. And I'm not saying that this is a test case for Iowa, that they got to figure out how to do this. And they probably got to go start knocking on some heavy booster doors to make it happen. But you got to do it. He's an in-state guy who's always wanted to come here. And if you could do that, yeah, you're going to plug your nose. It's not the way you want to do business, but you got to figure out a way to do it. And just basically don't tell everybody where your money's coming from. You don't have to.
Yes.
Except the government, of course.
And it will Obviously, if you do that, it opens up the door for future people, future recruits and players. Then you're kind of, once you open for business, you're open for business. So if that happens here, Iowa's open for business.
Yes. And then it is. And frankly, they've got to figure out a few other things going into the month of December too, financially. I mean, you got to get a quarterback. I don't think, we both think the world of Spencer Petras as a human being, and he's a decent quarterback at times. But I think it's probably time for everybody to turn that page. And by the way, Iowa has conducted its quarterback competition that I don't think that they believe they can say all they want. I don't think that Alex Padilla is their guy, and he graduates in December. So then it's like, okay, well, do you believe that Carson May or Joey Labus or, Marco Lainez, are they going to be the guy next year? Well, probably not, because they haven't gotten a game yet. So you got to go out and get somebody. You can't just get anybody. You got to get somebody decent. So you got to prove you're open for business there too. And then you probably need to do the same thing at wide receiver, because you don't know what may happen there on your own roster, let alone other people's. And then you got to also look at the offensive line again. If you somehow secure Caden Proctor and he signs on the dotted line, he's here in January, can he start immediately, day one? Is he good enough to? Or is he a rotational guy that you think, well, he's got the most upside of anybody we've seen other than maybe Tristan Wirfs, but he's not quite ready for that yet. Maybe you're going to have to go up and get somebody who can step in. And maybe you want to go get a senior or graduate transfer to step in at guard or something like that. And that's a lot of money we're talking, and if you're Gary Barta, you're looking at your own bottom line, but I think you're looking at the future of the Iowa Hawkeyes, which is player acquisition is where it goes. And then you got to drift that over to the basketball court too, because otherwise you're going to be dead there.
And it's no different. I mean, you got to look at this from a lens of professional sports. There are guys that haven't proven anything in the NFL, get drafted and just get obscene amounts of money, and they get paid more than guys that are already on the roster that have proven things. That's just the way it works. And that's when you're looking at it, look at it that way. And that's kind of what I think Kirk Ferentz needs to do. He has to come to an understanding that that's the landscape now. And if he wants to be a part of it, we saw Coach K, Jay Wright, they were like, we're out of here. We're not dealing with this. We'll pay people under the table, but we're not on the open.
Yeah, right.
But, and you have to make a decision. And I think that's going to be, we've seen it with Nick Saban. He's not comfortable with it, but he's doing it because he has to do it. You have to figure out if this is for you or isn't for you. Yeah,
right. And, I'm not making any predictions here, but I know Kirk is probably less comfortable with that than anybody. Because he really wants it to be a cohesive unit, one team, nobody more important than the team, all those types of things, which is admirable. But in this day and age, it's not. It's naive to think that's going to be the case, because then you might get chipped away. Then you might have, a really good player, and in basketball, you might get a player who leaves, like Tyrese Hunter, at Iowa State, to me is a perfect example of got to be in that game or your things are going to happen. And I think that's the same way here. And so can he sustain it? It's been a lot of change for him over the last few years. He's still navigated it very well. I mean, even though the nepotism discussion with his son, the offensive challenges, those are all real. But these off-field stuff, he's had to fight. He's had to go through a lot, and this one is another big one. And this is a big step. This one is probably the most uncomfortable one for him, because I think the other ones he maybe understood where he was wrong. This one he probably still feels he's right, but you're stuck. And at 67 years old, when do you say, you know what, I've had enough of this?
It's against his belief system and his philosophy and the foundation of his program, which is scholarship player or walk-on. You come in here and you earn it. If you're giving people financial compensation before they get here, that blows that up. or at least you have to figure out how to make that work. Yeah. And he's a smart guy. We've both been around him a long time. He's not seeing this and saying, I don't understand. He understands. It's a matter of him figuring out how to make it work with what he does and his beliefs as a coach and how he wants to run his program.
Right. Because I think the worst thing he would want is to see that guy that maybe they did take a chance on, let's say Mason Richmond.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden next year, what if he takes that step from being pretty good to where he is to maybe like, wow, he's Brian Bulaga, as a left tackle. And Caden Proctor is good for a first year guy and his upside's immense, but he's not what Mason Richmond is. I'm just using that as an example, but we're paying this guy X, or through our collective X, this guy is barely getting anything. That's what makes him most uncomfortable, that he would rather say, let's flip it. And then when he gets to be that good, and I don't think he'd ever have a problem with that part of it, but the problem is paying them before they get here. That's just so anti to what he wants to do, but it's a reality of the system. And you've got to make sure, make it work, and how you make it work. And I don't know. I haven't talked to Caden as you haven't either, but I just don't know what's next there.
Yes. Market value, capitalism, go capitalism. That's where we are now. So speaking of basketball recruiting, we'll transition into this. And thank you very much to Matt Weitzel for putting the pronunciation out for this young man. 6'9", 250 pounds, out of Newark, New Jersey, St. Benedict's Prep, Laji Dembele. Start to learn that, Scott. He is the newest Iowa Hawkeye. He signed yesterday, making it a 4-person 2023 recruiting class. He joined Owen Freeman and Brock Harding from Moline High and Price Sanford from Waukee Northwest High. That is your 2023 Iowa recruiting class, at least as it stands now. You never know. And as we just talked about, the landscape is ever changing, and who knows what it's going to look like in the spring in terms of what Iowa's roster looks like. But this is a nice pickup, Scott. He had quality offers, one being from Rutgers. Pittsburgh, I think, was in there. Wake Forest, Xavier. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but good schools, good basketball schools. So this was a nice pickup for a guy halfway across the country and who came from another country.
Yeah, right. He's from Maui, and he, has played, New York area. He went to the same school as Jim Delaney. How about that? So, I
did not know that. There's the factoid for you.
Yeah, right. But, he's listed as a forward. He's 6'9", 250. I don't know, where that puts him. I mean, does that make him a legitimate 5 in Iowa's offense?
Old school power 4 is really. And we saw it a little bit last night. I'm sure you watched the game, Scott. Rebounding is what they need. A dog. They need a Reggie. This guy's like a Reggie Evans, go get it type dog. If you watch him, he goes after the ball.
Right. And you think about that just with this team and this program and where it stands now, because, again, I think Raka to me is more of a 4 playing out of position, but Iowa's offense isn't that traditional pounded into the 5. I mean, it kind of was with Adam Woodbury, just because that's where he could play. But like with Luka Garza, he could do so many different things. It was an untraditional 5. And when this guy, maybe he's more of a 4, but he'll play a lot of 5. It's hard to say, but I think this is a really good pickup to get at this stage in the ball game, and to add to that class. I mean, Sanford's younger brother Price is, highly considered. And then, Owen Freeman is also kind of more in that category. And Brock Harding, he's an interesting one to me just because, is he going to be one of those developmental guys that really shines? I think Jordan Bohannon was kind of that way, that he looked like a fallback and then he got in and then, wow, he was a really key guy for 18 years. And, will Brock Harding be in that ballpark? I don't know. So, but I do think that Dembele is got a chance to be a special player from day one.
Yeah, I just think it's a nice fit. And like you said, Fran is a lot about versatility and positionless basketball. So I still do it too. I'm like, is he a 4? Is he a 5? Is he a 3? He's a guy that can go in there and rebound and probably defend and give you a little muscle inside. And he complements an Owen Freeman, who's a little bit more, I would say more athletic, better shot, guy that can, do a little bit more Jared Uthoff type. So I think he's just putting the pieces together. And I don't want to make this negative, Scott, but we talked about it a few minutes ago. The NIL impacted this class for Fran McCaffrey.
Yeah, for sure. And it really limits them to what they can and can't do, because basketball's always been at the forefront of the bag man. We haven't seen it as much in football, but certainly in basketball, we joked about it earlier, and that was true too. But, it's always been a factor in basketball, and this is way up front, and this is what Fran always knows, that you better be up front with your money as opposed to, you'll get it at some point, blah blah blah. So it hurt them in getting a true 5 this year. They would have had a true 5 if they had. Yeah.
You had Estrella and you had TJ Power.
Yeah.
One went to Duke, the other one went to Tennessee, and they both got paid.
Yeah. So it's weird, when you look at Fran, and he knows the game. I would say this about all of Iowa's coaches, in particular, the two most recognizable, which are Fran and Kirk. They are not stupid at all. They are very smart. They know the game. They know how they want to play it, but they know the game and what they need to do. And this will, if the situation goes against Kirk in football, it'll wound him. It won't kill him, but it can kill basketball very quickly. If you just can't get in that game, you go immediately. One player is the difference between finishing second or third in the Big Ten and finishing 7th. And I'm not even talking about a Keegan Murray. I'm just talking about a good role player that gets you 12 and 10. And if you can't get 2 guys, you might be going to the NIT when you might have a legitimate NCAA team just based on this. So, but that's the one that I would not see Fran ever wanting to leave Iowa. Not with 2 sons now on the team, another one, on the way at some point, but. The NIL situation could be the one that makes him go, maybe we look around on this one.
Yeah, I'm just overall all encompassing on this, Scott. To wrap up the NIL discussion, I think you and I have discussed this since way back 2 years ago when this was coming, and kind of we've watched this thing evolve and where it's gotten to now, and how Iowa's played the game. I think Iowa needs to continue to evaluate this and figure out how to compete in this market, for lack of a better term. And you can't be stubborn about it. You have to understand what the competition is doing and put yourself into position to compete. Because if you're hurting yourself, you're hurting everybody. You're hurting your programs, your athletic department, your kids that are here on campus. It's these guys being Kirk Ferentz, Fran McCaffrey, they get paid a lot of money. And part of that is trying to figure out how to compete at the highest level. This is now an element of that.
Right. You look at this, you look at the current football team that we've talked about. What would they be like if they would have hit the portal and had more money too, or been pushed in that direction, and they would have found a tackle, a receiver, and a quarterback? Where would they be right now with that?
Michigan center's pretty good.
Yeah, and that would have been a pretty nice pickup for them. They wouldn't have had any snap issues. Although, that's a tough one for them. But no, if they would have got a tackle, what if they would have gotten a guard like Hunter Norzad? What if they would have gotten a tackle? What if they would have gotten a wide receiver? What if they would have kept Charlie Jones? Yep. Or if they would have gotten, persuaded a Grayson McCall to enter the portal? But stuff like that would have changed this program this year to, instead of being 6-4, they're at least 8-2 at a minimum. And they are seen as a top 15 program. And
it'd be one thing if the resources weren't there, Scott. They're there. Yeah. It's whether or not you want to use them.
Right. the way you allocate them. And I think that's where, whether it's, because, the I Club and all that kind of stuff, they generate tons and tons and tons of money. They're going to have to just go to some boosters. They're just going to have to say, hey, thank you for all your support. We want you to direct some of your support in this direction. It's just, you have to. Otherwise, so you want to make sure that the AD gets a bigger bonus. Come on, in the long run, that'll get you fired, because then you lose a trophy game. You lose the Big Ten West title when it's winnable. You don't go to a bowl game, or you go to a one that nobody wants to go to because the press box is open and it's cold. And you don't go to the NCAA tournament. You get your coach fired, or he decides, you know what, I can't win here and I'm leaving. And then you got coaches who say, well, shoot, if they're not going to pay him or get him guys, why should I go there too? Or it's a stepping stone, which may be worse. So I think overall, and I'm just kind of rolling down this path, but because I know that they care, but they're just going to have to really put the pedal to the metal and do what Evie used to do. That's neat. Alex Karras took a pay cut to go to the Detroit Lions.
You got to be in the game. You have to be in the game. And we've said that since day one, Scott, that you have to play the game and you have to do that. And we'll see where it goes. Let's talk a little Iowa men's basketball. The Hawkeyes with an 83-67 victory at Seton Hall last night. First real challenge of the season. Iowa came through with flying colors. Got off to a slow start, down 10-2, but turned it around quickly. Chris Murray was absolutely superb. 10 of 20 from the floor, 3 of 8 from 3. 6 of 6 from the line, 11 rebounds, 29 points. He also had an assist and a block. And he was plus 14. We had 7 guys play at least 19 minutes. So pretty small rotation, smaller rotation than we're used to out of Fran, and some interesting combinations at the end of the game too. So I think he's got a pretty good feel for this roster. He should. 2 of the guys are his kids, so he knows what they're capable of. But Connor McCaffrey and Ulis were the 2 guys off the bench that played 27 and 23 minutes. Sanford was the starter who played 19. He just didn't have a shot last night. So when he's not doing that, that's obviously a drawback for him. But this is a nice win against the team that plays like a Big Ten team. Very physical, very handsy, very, you're going to have to you're going to have to be tough. You're going to have to be physically tough, mentally tough. I was a little worried early, but they figured it out, and they've got some dogs. Tony Perkins is a dog, no doubt about it.
Yeah, early on, the only player that seemed to be scoring was Chris Murray. But you know what? I think if anybody's questioning whether Chris Murray is capable of taking that role, now that question's been answered. He can, and he will, because he's, and shooting from the outside, he did a nice job, and they really weren't hitting any threes. They only hit 5, and he had 3 of them. So he looked the part. He looked every bit the part that Keegan looked like last year to some extent. And while everybody else was kind of floundering early on offensively, he kept them in the game. And then, of course, they really took over. And a couple of times it got chopped to single digits, but, it wasn't really that close, throughout the second half and what have you. And they were able to draw fouls, which I thought was pivotal. And I know the home crowd didn't like that very much, but they were legit for the most part, I thought. And so I thought this was nice. Connor McCaffrey had one big shot, but it was big at the time.
His shot looks better. His shot looks like he's fixed it a little bit. It used to be more of a line drive. He's got nice arc on it now.
He's, I think it's probably not playing baseball anymore. And he's, last year, having 2 hips, both hips having surgery.
And a shoulder issue.
Yeah. Right. So he's finally healthy to an extent. And Peyton Sanford, that's not a typical performance for him. We'll see more there. But
if you watch him, he's one of the main guys on the bench who's into it when he's not in the game. He's a very good teammate. Yeah.
But, Tony Perkins, it's really fascinating to me because he's a guy that, I never really projected him at that position as running the point, but he might be exactly what Iowa needs because he's a tough dude and he gets his buckets, but man, he's just, they haven't really had the last one that reminds me of him, and he's better, of course, was Bryce Cartwright, just kind of a tougher guy out there running the show. But I think, Perkins is advanced beyond that. I just really think that they got a chance they look to me the part. Like, okay, this is a good team. This is a team that's going to compete, and yeah, they're going to get beat, and everybody's going to complain. But Chris Murray, superstar.
Got toughness. Rebrach is tough. As we said, Perkins is tough. They defend. It's going to be rebounding. They're undersized on a lot of nights when you're playing Rebrach at the 5. They got to figure out how to rebounding. I thought they did rebound. I thought they did that as the game went on. They just went a little tougher, went a little harder at the glass, and it's going to be effort a lot of times, more that effort and positioning and understanding angles and things like that and being committed to it. I think they can do it, and they're good defensively, that you don't want to give teams extra opportunities if you're playing really good defense on that, the first round of a possession. I think Tony Perkins is the best two-way guard under Fran.
That's saying something, Rob. That's
because I watched him steal. I mean, he plays defense. He's a willing and able defender on the ball, and that changes everything you can do.
Yeah, you're right. He's a guy that you would say he'd be wearing green and white. He's a Michigan State guard, and that's something that Iowa's never really had. Just a tough, I'm gonna kick your ass kind of guard. Both sides. I don't care. I'm going to, and that's back before they started actually doing it. And they were when Michigan State just seemed to be the dominant team on the floor every time against them. And they took that abuse. That always seemed to be the issue to me, is they just, they weren't tougher. And now I think they are with that guy. So, Perkins has been really good there. I like the way he draws fouls, handles himself well. Man, I can't think of a better guard. You're right.
I guess if you want to say Wieskamp, but I think of him more as a 3. Well, again, with the numbers, small forward, more of a wing. Tony's a guard. Tony is that to me is. I bet you Matt Painter wishes he had him.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, why didn't you recruit that guy? But and Wieskamp's a different kind of player. I mean, again, this is. With Tony Perkins, what you got. You got a dog. You got a dog, man. He's going to be out there. And he's going to be tough. And he's going to, and Wieskamp was a good defender, no doubt, and very, very good shooter and a great player. But this is a difference. This is a difference maker. So I think this is that they not only survived, but they really passed the test with flying colors, which is go to a place. I mean, they got a new coach, but hey, that coach led St. Peter's to the Final Four Elite Eight last year. So I think overall you got to be really happy with how you play. There's some to work on, of course, but going into what's going to promise to be a busy, tough couple of weeks, going down to Florida, playing Georgia Tech, playing Iowa State, playing Duke. They've got some games coming up. So
Georgia Tech, right? In the ACC challenge?
Yeah. The 29th against Georgia Tech. So, and I think they play Clemson and, first down in Florida. So, they've got some tests coming up, but this is one where I think it's like, okay, you can handle it. And Chris Murray, he's playing like his twin brother.
Tony Perkins last night, 18 points, 5 assists, 3 steals, only 2 turns. He was plus 15. Aaron Eulis had 8 points. I thought he played well off the bench. 4 guys in double figures. Patrick McCaffrey had 11. Rebrach had 10. As we mentioned, Chris Murray with 29 and Perkins with 18. Connor McCaffrey with 5 off the bench. 2 steals for Connor as well. So the Hawkeyes will return home on Monday against Omaha. So Hawkeye fans, get out and get a chance to see them play. It's well worth your time and resources to go check them out. I think this is a really exciting, fun team to watch, as are the Iowa women, Scott, which got tested at Drake. And Iowa State got tested last night at UNI. I like that the women still play these the biggies still play on the road against the mid-major, so to speak, teams. And watch that game on Sunday, and Iowa got all it wanted from a game Drake team that obviously wants to beat, Goliath. And Drake had 5 players in double figures. Iowa got 36 and 11 from Monica Zizano and 28 points from Caitlin Clark. They had 62 of Iowa's. What did Iowa end up in the game? 92. So very, what you're getting from the Iowa women. And the Iowa women, for those that are interested, will play tonight in Manhattan, Kansas against Kansas State. That's an 8 p.m. tip. And unfortunately, you have to have ESPN Plus to watch that one.
Well, because there won't be any Hawk Talk tonight, I probably will watch that on ESPN Plus. So
I have the Plus as well. I have the Disney bundle.
Yeah, I do too. Well, shoot, it's NFL football. I for whatever reason, I was thinking today was
Who is NFL tonight?
It's the Packers and the Titans.
That's decent compared to what we have been getting on Thursday night.
Right. Yeah, my Bears were not a very good pick a few weeks ago against the Washington Commanders. But yeah, I mean and against Drake, I mean these are games that this is why what we saw this week, Iowa Drake and Iowa State and Northern Iowa. Those are the reasons why these this is why the men don't play them anymore, because you don't want to have these types of games where yes they won, but that was way closer than what they wanted. And they gave them everything that they wanted. 92-86 for Iowa. And you look at Caitlin Clark, she did not have a great game. She had 28 points, but 9 of 28 and 4 of 14 from 3. That's not what she wants to do. Coming back to her hometown to play this game, that's you're lucky you have somebody like Zanano who can actually score these points and go 36 and 11 because you can't. They were 9 of 27 from 3, which is really un Iowa-like, and they've got to be better there. And but I think that's a good thing for this team because they've got some tough ass games coming up. NC State and Iowa State, and in the Big Ten. I mean, they kind of gerrymandered the schedule, so they're playing a lot of the toughies because what people want to watch this Iowa team. So I think it's a good thing for them. They sometimes you get teams like this, they believe their own press clippings, as we would say back in the day. Now their own internet headlines.
Internet hype.
Yeah, internet hype. So, hey, they got a lot to work on defensively, of course, even more. So I think they got to figure that out, and if they don't, well, they're going to get a dose of reality pretty quickly.
Yeah, really good road experience, was sold out at the Knapp Center, really good environment and good test. And they passed. Wasn't easy, but they got through it. And as I said, they will play Kansas State tonight, 8:00 ESPN Plus. We'll hit on wrestling real quick. They haven't really gotten into their season hardcore yet. Opened up last Sunday with a 42-3 victory against California Baptist at Carver Hawkeye. This week, they've got the New York trip, Scott, tonight against, this is on Flow Wrestling. They wrestle Army at West Point. Very cool. And then the Arm Bar at the Armory in the state capital of New York, Albany. They will wrestle Sacred Heart tomorrow night and Buffalo tomorrow night. So kind of cool, kind of a cool little trip for Iowa. And again, like the Iowa women's basketball team, you get away from home, you get out there a little bit. It's a bonding experience. All of those things help you as the season goes on.
Yeah, exactly. And then they've got, an all-star classic coming up. So they're doing some really smart things. I think, I'm sure for the wrestling team and, the Brands brothers, going to Army is going to be a really cool experience for them.
Yep.
Because, the long gray line, now it doesn't extend to football, man, it would be great to see that game too. But I think, being able to get out there at West Point, Albany, get 3 duels in, probably multiple guys wrestling in different tournaments because they're not going to expect a I wouldn't expect that they would lose. And plus, they don't seem to care too much about the duels themselves. But that's good for them. The one thing I've always kind of wondered about is, man, why can't they wrestle you and I anymore? I think that would make sense. And even if they do it at a neutral site, like, hey, every year they have a point or something, that would be something to do. But either way, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I agree with you. I think I missed the men's basketball games that, when they were played at the Unidome and then the McLeod Center or the Knapp Center. Those were fun games, man. Those were, and Iowa lost some of those. But they were fun games to be at. I think they were good for the state. I get why they don't play them anymore, but I think the fans miss out. Yeah.
Well, when you have, like in some of these games, they have Georgia Tech coming in. They're an ACC opponent, but are they one that everybody's like, man, I can't wait to see that game? No. Yeah. Duke, yes, but not Georgia Tech. Iowa State, yes, but it's every other year. Then what at home? Other than the Big Ten, it just kind of fizzles. And that's one thing I think people miss out is even if they're not playing these home and homes that they used to against Missouri or, maybe a different team just to, hey, let's shake things up. At least when you have Northern Iowa and Drake, there was some sort of local connection. You knew the team. Usually you knew some players on the team. Some of them played against some of the Iowa players in high school or they're from your community. The Des Moines Big Four Classic was, it was okay, but now there's nothing like that. And that's really kind of a shame, because, and I know people at UNI and Drake are chapped and, well, so what? That's the way the world works. But I do think it brought something. And back in the days when football ended this weekend, this was the end. And then you'd kind of have Thanksgiving week off. And then it was like, okay, there's, you're playing at, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, and then maybe a week later, Drake. It always felt like, okay, now they turn the page into basketball. There's really not much of that anymore.
Could have had the Peyton Sanford, Tucker DeVries story angle to high school teammates who led their team to the state championship going against each other with Drake and Iowa. But those storylines are lost. But what's not lost, Scott, is me turning it around in the picks. I'm not getting too cocky because this is probably a 1 week wonder, but I'm going to take it. Got back to 500 as you texted me last night. Story of my life. Average.
Yeah. Hey, at least you're getting back to average. At this stage of our old dude existence, we're past the average point in most things, especially lifespan, unfortunately. But you went 6-1 last week, and I went 5-2, and we didn't share a common misstep, which is unusual. The only one you lost was Illinois -6.5 against Purdue. And I picked Maryland plus 10.5 and got smoked there. And I picked Michigan State -9.5, and they kind of blew the spread on that one. They were up big, and then they blew it.
Yeah, I saw that one surprised me. The one when Rutgers got the back door.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm 50-38-1. You're 44-44-1, and we're down to the final 2 weeks here of the regular season. And let's start.
My goal is to get above the water where I can breathe.
Yeah, so you can stick your lips out of the water or your eyes, one of the two. Yeah, make a plus. But first one, the Ohio State University. -27.5. I'm using Bet Rivers, by the way. -27.5 at Maryland. What do you think, Rob?
This has been an interesting game in the past. Maryland's, if I remember correctly, has given them decent tests before. I think Ohio State's on a mission. I think the Buckeyes are trying to put together some style points here as well as winning football games and have things going at a really good level right now. Defense is different than it was last year. It's a good defense, and I think it will be able to silence what Maryland can do offensively, which is Maryland's got some explosive players, but I think Ohio State handles it, and I'm going to go with the better team here covering the spread.
All right. I originally was thinking Maryland just because I think of their offense. But then when you think of what happened last week, you're like, what the hell? And this is kind of Maryland's trend. They've done it every year like this, where they start somewhat strong, then they run into a buzzsaw like last year Iowa, this year Penn State, and then they fade. And
they're like the rabbit in the marathon. They get out quick, and then they don't realize it's a marathon, and they fade.
Yeah, and they're not losing to turtles because they are the turtles.
Yes, exactly. Good point.
Yeah, exactly. Next one, and so I'm picking Ohio State as well, just because I think that they'll just boat race them. 4-touchdown victory, and although as you said, Maryland sometimes can just shock you, but after scoring they lost 30-0 last week. I thought that was that's why I picked Maryland last week, so I'm not doing it this week. They screwed me over. Next one is Illinois at Michigan. Michigan -18. I'm going to go with a little bit of a weird one. I'm going to pick the Illini. I just think that even though Michigan's the better team, I think they can throw down with Michigan. I'm not saying they'll win, but I just think that after 2 straight weeks, Burt will have them ready, that they'll fight. They may lose, but it might be like by 10 instead of 18.
I'm going to go opposite you here and take Michigan. I think, again, with the style points, Michigan needs them more than Ohio State because of its terrible non-conference schedule. And it probably needs to beat Ohio State anyway to get in because of that. But if they have any chance to get in with a loss to Ohio State, it's going to take, dominating this week as well against, one of the better teams in the West, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Michigan is that much better. I think the 18, I wish it was 17, but I will throw the points and take the Wolverines.
Okay. I'm going to go, as I said, I'm going to go with the Illini. Penn State -19 at Rutgers. Rutgers plays tough. I mean, we saw it last week, and this is their last chance if they want to get to a bowl. I don't think it's realistic, but I'm still going to go with the Nittany Lions. I think they're taking it up a notch. I think they're playing pretty well on defense, better than last year. And whether it's Clifford or Aller, that offensively they're getting back into a pretty good groove.
Agree. Yeah, there's the top tier of Ohio State and Michigan. Then Penn State's on a tier by itself. And then you can argue about who the tiers are below that. But I think Penn State is clearly, and not breaking any news here, the 3rd best team in the league. Yeah. And I'll take them to win in New Jersey. Short trip.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important for them, too, because they recruit heavily in New Jersey.
Right. And Schiano is, former Penn State guy. I mean, so he's going to have them prepared. But is that going to matter? I mean, when I was out there, they played hard. I'll give them that, but they're not good.
He needs to figure out an identity on offense. They need to figure out what they want to be on offense. He's got it figured out defensively, but offensively, he's got to figure it out.
Yeah, they're going to need – I think they can survive as kind of like a West Division style of Minnesota style of offense. But they're going to need a quarterback. They haven't had one. Their quarterback is worse than what Iowa has. So Wisconsin, the team that Iowa vanquished this last weekend, is -12 at Nebraska. It's always weird to try to figure out the Nebraska teams. Like last year when they fired their offensive coaches, they went to Camp Randall. I thought, oh, this is going to be a bloodbath. And then they competed and almost won. This time around, we know that the time is short. They got crushed by Michigan. They got, they had a decent lead on Illinois, Minnesota. And then, they came back and beat them. That said, I like Wisconsin. I think they've got a good approach. I'm not saying they're good. I'm just saying that they're better. The 12 points is a lot to give up, but I'm still going to give it up. I'm going to go with Badgers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I said last week or the week before, I'm not taking Nebraska anymore. I've been burnt too often by the Huskers. Casey Thompson is back, I believe. Yeah. So that is helpful, obviously. But I think Wisconsin runs the hell out of the ball and controls the clock and is able to cover that, wins by a couple touches.
Yeah. Northwestern at Purdue. Purdue minus 19.5. And it's weird because I can see this game in two different veins, Rob, which is one is, oh wow, here comes Evan Hull, and they're really running the ball and they're playing tight, and it's cold and it's tough and it's close. And Northwestern, not saying that they're going to win, but I can see it being that way. Or I can see Purdue just saying, and they take off and score a lot. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm going to go with more of that outcome with Purdue. I think Purdue can put up some points on the Wildcats, and so I'm going to go with Purdue minus 19.5.
Yeah, Purdue had a nice bounce back last week after losing to Iowa, going to Illinois and getting the win. I think they're back on track. Northwestern is awful. I will take the Boilermakers here. Big day for Charlie Jones and the Purdue offense. Talking about somebody who needs a program that needs to figure it out. Northwestern be an interesting offseason for them. They've got to figure some things out. I know Pat Fitzgerald's another smart guy. He's got to figure this out. Hankwitz is gone. You better figure out what you're going to do next.
They need to figure it out on both sides of the ball. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they just decide, you know what, we're going to take a different approach both ways. Defensively, they have to, because that's what they hung their hat on, kind of like Iowa, that they've been, even in the years where they haven't been very good, they've at least been tenacious defensively. I think back to the 19 year where they were like 1-8, but even against Iowa, it was like 20-0, and they played hard. They've got to do that, and they got to get back to kind of what they did well. I wouldn't be surprised to see some pushes for some really good assistants in the West Division, to take over someplace like that. But anyway, Indiana at Michigan State minus 10.5. I've seen all I've wanted to see out of the Hoosiers this year. I don't know that they are even come close to winning another game. I'm going with Sparty.
Yeah, I don't need to break this one down enough a ton for anybody. Indiana's bad.
Yeah.
Give me Michigan State.
They're back to being what they once were, which is nothing.
Coaching change there. When you think?
I think they got to be close. I mean, they extended Tom Allen and paid him a lot back in the COVID year, and the COVID year was a weird year, as we know. There was a lot of outliers, teams getting near or in the top 10 that have never been there before.
Yeah.
Them being one, another team in Iowa being another. But I think this is a situation where you got to decide. I mean, are you going to be in it or you're not? And Tom Allen's a great guy. I think he would be a good defensive coordinator for somebody.
Northwestern.
Yeah, there you go. You just float over there. Yeah. They should play each other in this finale, But toilet finale. Finally, we have Iowa at Minnesota. Minnesota minus 3. It's been holding pretty steady most of the week, and that's what Bet Rivers has them as minus 3. And I'm going to go Iowa. I think Iowa, has the defense that's going to neutralize the running game, and we've seen them play this way for so many years, and certainly this year is just hang on. The offense will take advantage of it. It's going to be a cold day for everybody, but I guess I look at it as both defenses are capable of making the other team struggle. I just think Iowa punts, and I think Minnesota, fumbles or throws an interception or two and turns it that way.
Yeah, I'm with you. This is our last week at the Bet Rivers college football pick'em contest. The only one that I've logged so far out of my 5 bets is the Iowa money line. I think Iowa wins this game outright. It worries me a little bit that Minnesota's stayed a favorite this week. It's almost like they're begging you to take Iowa.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I'm a little bit closer to the situation because a lot of times those betting lines are public perception. And both teams have a 3-game winning streak, but they aren't always put together equally. Iowa has the more impressive 3-game winning streak by far. I think Minnesota's just come against Northwestern, Rutgers, and Nebraska.
Yeah,
Iowa's won at Purdue and beat Wisconsin, and then also had Northwestern.
Yeah.
So that's the common opponent. But I think Iowa's run here is a little bit more impressive than Minnesota. I think it has the best unit on the field, as it normally does on defense. And special teams, I think, will be play a big role. And I think Spencer and the Iowa offense has figured out, okay, let's wait for our shots. Let's take advantage of our shots. Let's not do anything stupid.
Yeah. I'm thinking in the neighborhood of, say, like 17-10.
That's my pick in my preview.
Yeah, I think everybody's got that. It's like, but and I can see it 13-10. I can see it 17-6. I can see it, a lot of
6-3.
Oh my God, that would be the sickos game of the century, wouldn't it? Because it's going to be cold. Oh my God, is it going to be cold? It actually has the chance. I need to look up historically at Memorial Stadium there, but it'll be right now. It looks like it'll be the coldest game Minnesota's had since it moved into the Dome after the 81 season. So, 40 years at least.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know about before that. And then it'll be colder than any of the games Iowa's ever had, at least at Kinnick. And then Wisconsin, I think the last one that was in this neighborhood was like 1964. So, and I can't speak to Michigan or Michigan State, but that it just seems like it has the potential to be one of the coldest games in Big Ten history, which I guess suits these two teams. But a lot of people are like, but you also think, man, just 5 miles away, you have a great, beautiful dome that cost $1 billion.
And you're outside.
And you're outside. And you let them go there several times when they needed you. 2 years, 2 seasons while they're building it. And one year they came over. I went to that game when the dome imploded.
Yeah.
Maybe return the favor. That'd be a nice little doohickey for the Vikings to do that. But then, of course, they've got a big game on Sunday against the Dallas Cowboys.
So I know a lot of folks listening to the podcast are going to the game, heading up north. Dress warm. Be careful in that type of cold. Make sure your hands, face, cover what you need to cover. Don't need anybody succumbing to the elements up there. And hopefully Iowa gets the win, and then we'll be back next week. Obviously, we'll not be recording on Thursday next week because Scott and I will be enjoying Thanksgiving with our families. We'll maybe go to Wednesday. Scott and I will talk about it and figure it out. But we will be back next week with a Hotspot podcast, looking back at this Minnesota game. And ahead to the season finale, Black Friday, Nebraska, coming to Kinnick Stadium. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to our sponsors, and we will be back to talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Bye, Scott.